Alec, I'm ready to make you an offer that you cannot refuse.
You're gonna make me an offer I can't
And
refuse.
that is that we should review all the Godfather movies
Yeah,
in order.
yeah, in order.
Next few
Part one,
weeks.
part two, part three.
All right. What do you think of
Yeah,
that?
I think that's good. I think it's a good offer. I don't have any problems with that.
Oh, okay.
Godfather.
Okay,
You
then
know?
then we won't have any problems. That's all right.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Wow, I
let's
guess we
see.
sorted that out really easily. Okay.
This is very good.
Unlike most of the problems in this film.
So basically, we were tossing around for a while. What series should we do next? Star Wars was our big movie series. We wanted to do more of those because it's
Hmm.
kind of cool getting to like not only experience some of these things again and be able to review all of them, but also just see them in order and see how it goes. But we
Yeah.
specifically wanted to do one that neither of us had seen the movies for, because you had seen um, all the Star Wars and I had seen some of them before. So
Hmm.
this one's completely fresh to us. The Godfather is a classic that people have talked about for ages. You know, it's one of the go-to. It's like kind of like the Silence of the Lambs treatment, where it's just held in a high regard.
Extremely high regard. I would say The Godfather even more so.
Yeah.
Um, I think certain public, I don't I think it might even be the American Film Institute calls it this behind Citizen Kane. It is the greatest American-made movie.
Mm-hmm. Um,
That's pretty high. That's pretty high honors, you know. Like, um,
so we both watched it. It's fresh for both of us. Very
yeah.
recently watched it. I gotta
Mhm.
tell you, I get it. I get it. I totally get. I totally get why it is held in such high regard.
I very so I love a lot of movies. I love a lot of things. Rarely am I watching a movie where I have like goosebumps or chills throughout the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
This was one of those movies.
It's so good.
I was like, I even one of my housemate I because normally I watch the movies here in my room, but both my housemates were like out doing stuff last night, so I started it, um, and it was probably like 2 hours in. One of them came down and was like, "Oh, he'd said something like, yeah, I'd seen it once before," and I was like, I don't even know how I'm gonna describe my feelings about this movie tomorrow. I was just like, there's so much. There's just so much.
It's
I was
big.
like, it's an experience.
It's big, and
It's big.
it's a long movie. But I was
Yeah.
not. I was not like, oof, man, let's hurry this up. At any point, I wasn't really like, no, this is really dragging on.
No,
Um,
it's a captivating 3 hours, which
yeah,
is like very few even Lord of the Rings. Like Lord of the Rings, I would say is a captivating 3 hours. But like, you gotta make sure you set time aside for this. But like, and really with any 3 hour movie, you sort of do. But like, you just brought right into this world. Um,
from the jump, there's so many standout scenes, but from the jump, the
yeah.
first opening scene is really engaging. Like
Mm,
where you're introduced to the Godfather himself,
yeah.
and just the way it's filmed and the acting, it's great. I mean,
Yeah.
I love Vito Corleone.
Yes,
Love him.
Marlon Brando, a
Yeah.
stunning performance. From what I understand, revitalized his career.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of had some like lesser, was kind of on the down and outs a little bit in the '60s, but came back punching real hard in this
Mm-hmm.
because holy crap, he was amazing. Every second he was on screen was like you were in. You believed that he was like he really believed in what he was doing. He was not a he didn't have a temper, which is interesting because like his oldest son does. He's very flies off the handle, very a lot played by James Caan, Sonny,
Sunny. Yeah.
and he was another stellar performance. But no, Marlon Brando was just amazing in this movie. It was just like
Yeah.
he very soft spoken, but like it was like with this weird like it was still like he had such a commanding presence every time when he was in the room. It was it's quite a performance.
Yeah, it's like I'd never seen the movie before, but obviously it's such a big has such a big impact on like
Yeah.
the cultural zeitgeist of films, you
Oh,
know.
for
So
sure.
you know, like the voice is iconic.
Yeah.
that way of speaking, and that I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse. That's iconic.
Yeah.
Um,
The first kind of the first big like you see the real dark side of what he can do, waking up to the horse head in the bed
hmm
there. That's an iconic scene. Like that's been parodied
Look,
and people
I
talk
didn't know
about that
about
for a
that
long
one
time.
actually,
Oh, you didn't know about that one?
and
I
I
did.
loved that.
I did. Oh, that was what a scene. That was amazing.
But yeah, that freaking opening scene
Mm,
is even like Zootopia does that with the little mouse.
hmm.
It's like, how can you do this on my daughter's birthday?
Yeah, on the day of my yeah, on the
It
day.
was like, yeah, it was my.
Yeah.
It could have been the same. I think it was like literally the same thing on in Zootopia. It was like the daughter's wedding.
Yeah. Yeah.
He goes through
Yeah,
the whole spiel, and
it's been parodied for and referenced to in all kinds of things for the whole history of time. Ever since this movie came out, it's like it's really captivated. Just
it's so good.
yeah,
And
it really is.
the arc from seeing Michael in
Mm.
the beginning
Played
to
by
where
Al
he ends up.
Pacino,
Yeah,
amazing, another a stellar performance.
it's like for some reason I almost forgot when watching it that Al Pacino is so prominent in the film because it's like, oh,
Yeah,
he's just a side character, and you kind of you buy into it that he's like, oh, he doesn't want to be a part of the business. He's the good one.
yeah,
He doesn't want to be a part of the family, all the bad stuff they're into. But when you see him at the end, it's like such a stark contrast to where
he has basically become his father, only even I would say more ruthless.
yeah, more ruthless. Like he
Um,
takes out
takes out the whole
all
the whole
the heads of the
five families.
families.
Yeah, it's wild. My gosh,
It's
yeah.
just so cool. My favorite scene though in the whole movie is the well, probably. I mean, there are a lot of good scenes, but I think
Yeah.
I really love the restaurant, the
Yes.
when it goes to the bathroom and comes back out.
Yes.
It's such a good scene. I
Yeah.
was like, actually, really good tension building. You know,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Very good.
like there's a lot of scenes in movies where it's like, oh, you can tell the tension's supposed to be built here, and it's like really well filmed and whatnot. But this one was like, I just felt it, you know, and it was actually on edge. It's like, oh god, it's like because you can see them waiting out there, and it cross cuts back to him in the bathroom, and I'm like, oh, is something gonna go wrong here? What's gonna happen?
Yeah, the police chief keeps kind of like looking, like making sure, like, all right, he's taking a little bit. He's sort of like looking, and yeah, there's just so good at building the tension with that. Yeah,
So good.
one of my favorite scenes. It's a very small scene, a very short scene, but I was just like, I just loved it. It was just a very small scene where Sonny and the rest of the Corleones are having dinner, and he's talking about like business ideas. He's like, well, I got this idea for it's like, they like the entertainment. He uses the N word, but he's like, they like the entertainment and everything. We'll do this. And then Mama Corleone is like, well, your father never talked to, he never talked business at the table. And then so like, he kind of like grumbles and like conversation is going. And then his sister's husband, who she's married at the beginning of the movie, she like butts in with something, and he's like, shit, tells her, he's like, shut up, don't talk anything. And then Sonny interrupts him, and he's like, you never tell her what to do. Like, you don't tell her to shut up. And then Mama Corleone then cuts it again, and just like, no, just let them be, let them settle it. And then the husband butts in again. He's like, all right, well, Sonny, I do have some ideas. And he's like, no. We do not talk business at the dinner table.
Yeah.
And then the scene ends. I was just like, that was so perfect. Like, it was just setting the tone, getting the idea of the family dynamics, telling you things you need to know about like where the characters are at that period of time. Sonny had, for all intents and purposes, sort of taken over the business of things because at that point Vito had been shot and was hospitalized and was still recovering. And I can't remember his name, but he always was like, I want to do something, I want to help out. But then that's him telling the Corleone daughter to shut up is an indication that things are kind of tense there. What's going on with that? And that comes to a head later in the film. A lot of like those little moments like that are just like really really good.
Mm-hmm.
I like that scene a lot.
Yeah, and honestly,
And
Vito getting shot like that was a surprise to me. Cause
yeah,
I
I
was
didn't
like,
know
well,
about that. I had no idea about
I was
that.
like, did he actually just die there?
Yeah, I
And
was
then,
really surprised about that as well.
because that's when I started thinking. I was like, oh yeah, Al Pacino is big, so I guess it might make sense that he dies there and he becomes the lead. Which,
Mm.
like, I guess he ultimately does become that, but Vito, at least we get him through the rest of the movie,
Yeah.
just in a different role. But yeah, and obviously, The Godfather is also known for just a lot of these violent deaths,
Mm.
these death scenes too, where like Sonny's death,
Great,
Luca,
great,
Luca
another great scene.
Brasi.
Oh, look, pro Luca. I felt like Luca was just like, what a great. He was great. Like I
Mm-hmm.
love that. Like when he's practicing what he's gonna say to Michael, that man's talking to himself. That scary looking man is talking to himself.
And Apollonia, dude, that car explosion, Jesus.
Oh, geez, man! I didn't. That made me so sad. I was like, boy, as if
Wow.
Michael needed more reason to be upset and like want to get back home.
Then he just ends up going back to, what was her name? The girl he ends up being with.
Don't remember. She was in New Hampshire though. So I was like, hey, teaching in New Hampshire.
He just ends
Okay.
up going back to her. Like some time
Mhm.
has passed. But it's
Yeah,
like, let's forget about her now. She exploded in the car.
a couple of
Uh,
years it seemed like actually.
and
So
then she's like, I can only imagine where this relationship's gonna go down the line, because she's
yeah,
clearly not on board with the whole thing.
yeah,
And
that's a really good ending to the movie. Also, I really like the way that sort of scene.
where she's like, "Is it true?"
Is it true? Did that happen?
And he's like, "No."
Yeah, and he's like, I'll let you ask me one time about my affairs, but that's it. That's only one time. We're not going to talk about it anymore. And yeah, and he just straight up lies to her, and she seems to like believe it, but then of course she sees when she leaves the room and looks back in, there's all these his associates are all thanking him and
And
kissing his hand.
They close the door.
Close the door. Yeah.
So
It's
I imagine
very powerful symbolism of a lot of things. And in fact, I would say the movie does a really good job of highlighting how fairly misogynistic this kind of this subculture can kind of be at times.
Mhm.
I think they cherish their women, but they also they're not as important. Their role is very downplayed. They're there to pass on and sire new children, basically.
Yeah.
It's interesting because like that in and of itself, you get the sense that like I remember because the scene where he comes back and he finds her and he's like, you come with me, I need you, I love you. He finally says I love you to her, and then she just like goes along with him, and it's like she forfeits any agency that she had, because it's like, well, she did love him, she has a sense of security, money, she's gonna have children that she's always wanted, but it's like, well, at what cost did you sort of sell your freedom to, it's like, yeah, you didn't have a husband in it's interesting because I also like the time period it's set in. It's set in the 40s and the 50s, so that kind of makes that a little bit more believable too. It was really good, man.
I just imagine that. I mean, it could go a couple different ways, but I just imagine that relationship is going to get really toxic. That's just
Yeah.
the feeling
yeah.
I get, because he's already going down this path of where, like, in the beginning when they were first, like, together at the wedding, and, like, he was like, that's my family, that's not me. And he's clearly did not approve of it. And then he's completely different spot now. So, like, I feel like she's realizing too late that he's kind of gone down that path. But it's like you could have it go the way where she becomes more engrossed in that life. You've seen in a couple series where it's like that, where like the wife becomes more of an accomplice to the husband who's involved in the crime in some way. But a lot of times, and I just get the sense it will not be a beautiful blossoming relationship.
No.
I don't know.
Well, another thing, I find it was so interesting to me that the chief catalyst to a lot of the change that he did, you could tell that he kind of knew that he would have to choose at one time, like whether or not he was going to go down his family's path, join organ, basically be an organized crime member, or if he would just sort of chart his own path. But I love that the fact that the sort of the chief catalyst for him starting to take command of things was something so very simple, but it was simple but super important, and it was just why is no one with my father, why is no one here, why is no one at the hospital, and it was like that moment was like boom, he's taking command now.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, he tells the nurse what to do. Is like, no, we're gonna move him. There's people that want to kill him. We need to move him. He calls up his family. He's like, we need to get people over here. He goes with one guy that came to the wedding. They stand guard over at the front steps and pretend that they have guns, which they don't. Like that was just great. It was a great, like that's what gets him started down this dark path. It's something noble, really, something good. He he wanted protection for his family.
Mm.
But that's kind of the, you know,
But
the pathway to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah.
Right.
But then he's so eager to be the one to do the killing.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
Of the police chief, and
because the police chief punched him.
Yeah.
Basically, it was complete BS. It was just like totally unjustified.
Well, yeah, he was a corrupt.
Because he was a corrupt guy. He was in with some drugs, and yeah, he was in all these other families. He was kind of getting involved in that stuff. So,
mm-hmm. And that's the big thing where they had to send him away for an extended period of time. They had to send Michael away.
Oh, the scenes in Sicily were gorgeous too. By the way,
mm-hmm.
This movie has so much. It cherishes Italian American culture and Italian culture. I think it's. I was reading a little bit that like some of it did lead at the period of time to some negative perceptions of Italian Americans, and that's like, oh, they're all gangsters or whatever. But like to me, it was the thing that was so powerful about it was just showing like this is sometimes like it's not always the case. There's tons and tons of cases where this isn't where this didn't happen. But poor immigrant families coming to America, a lot of times this was the path you had to turn to try to survive. You know, in a sort of a dog eat dog world, but retaining that sort of dual identity of yes, we're living in America, but like the things that we hold fast to are the things that make us strong as Italians that came over to the New World as well. The super important significance of family and hearing to that. The faith too. Catholicism shows up a lot, which is funny. It leads to another really great scene towards the end of the film. The baptism scene.
Yeah, cross cut with
amazing scene. It's like, do you and for Satan do you reject him and his works? And he says, I do. Meanwhile, the foreheads of the families are getting murdered by his subordinates. So chilling.
Isn't it so great that the devil's advocate will come down the pipeline?
Yeah, right. Yeah, Al Pacino, there he goes. That's
he
it. Right
literally
there.
takes on the devil. Yeah.
Music. Stellar. Yeah. This is music I was already familiar with. Mm-hmm. Again, it was one of those cultural zeitgeist things. I knew a lot of the music in this already. Extremely good, very well known. The themes are. There's not a huge score to this film, but what's there is very powerful and very poignant. Mm-hmm. Cinematography too. There were so many. I think that to me was one of the reasons why like I had like chills all the time. I was like, ooh, just because the shot composition, the different like finding unique angles to film things at. Some of the long takes, the static shots were all really great when those were needed. Yeah, there was just a lot Francis Ford Coppola, man. There's a reason why he's down as like one of the like an auteur. You know, people hold him in very high regard, and it
Hmm.
shows.
Is there anything you can think of that you don't like about this movie? I struggle to think of any glaring flaws.
Not tremendously. I think I could understand why some people would say that it glorifies the mafia. Maybe that could be a problem. I mean, the mobs loved this film,
Yeah,
by the way.
yeah, I know they
Like
do.
they spoke out very publicly about how much they loved this film.
Dude, after I watched this movie, I went and I was just like obsessed with the whole mafia culture for a couple hours. Just went on
Yeah.
YouTube and I was watching the one guy who his name is Michael. He was like a big mob boss
Mm,
who is one of the very few to actually come out of it and survive and be living a normal life now. And like
mm.
he did a video talking about this movie, and he was saying how good a lot of the scenes are. There are a couple scenes where he's like that wouldn't happen at all, but most
Yeah.
of them are like it's a pretty good Godfather. Like Godfather is
Yeah.
one of the best, and it just
Yeah.
it was like, oh, I want to play Mafia now.
Mafia 3, yeah, the remaster just came out.
Yeah, I want to get the whole trilogy. I actually have Godfather the game on PS2.
Which is interesting because Francis Ford Coppola hates that exists. He despises it. He was
Why
like,
is
they
it-
didn't ask me about it. I do not want them to glorify the
Right.
this stuff. So
Well, I mean, yeah, but yeah, you're right. It's like it is because it makes them look cool. It does.
it does, and they're terrible people.
Yeah. So it's
Um,
like that's the conclusion you should make as a reasonable person watching this is that
yeah,
in the end, Michael you thought was the good one, but you shouldn't like Michael either by the end of it.
yeah,
He's
Yeah.
doing some awful stuff, and you have the baptism cut with all the bad stuff he's doing.
yeah.
Um,
There's a lot of there's a lot that's really poignant in that, and again, sort of back to that final scene where it's like he used to be so he would tell her everything. Remember, they were very much in love towards the beginning of the movie, and then the closing of the door is like the closing off of their relationship.
mhm.
Like she's basically she exists to be his wife now,
Ye-
not a confidant.
It's like
Confidant.
If Padme didn't die, this is where their relationship would go. Anakin
Yeah.
and Padme,
Yeah.
right?
It's not a good not a good scene. Yeah, we haven't seen him be actually like abusive to her, so which is
Something to look
You know.
forward to in part 2, I'm sure.
yeah. Please don't. Well, part two is held in extremely high regard also. So
Mhm.
some people say it's better than the first one. So
Really? Okay.
yeah.
Wow.
So I don't know about that. We'll see. This is a pretty high bar in my book.
Yeah.
I really liked this quite a lot. Yeah, I mean, so back to the sort of mob culture kind of thing. There was a Boston crime family that actually sort of one of the heads of the family actually like took on like he began to start talking like Don Corleone like with the afterwards, I guess. There's parts of this that also remind me of a story that my dad told me about when he was in college. I don't remember if it was a roommate or if it was somebody on his floor in college, but it was his name was Lewis, and I think he came from a like kind of in a situation similar to Michael. His family had mob connections. He was, for more lack of a better term, he was a son of somebody who was in the mob, the Boston mob. So, but that didn't really mean too much of anything. But there was one time, there was a couple of times that some of his family came and paid visits, which resulted in apparently one of the greatest smorgasbord of meat that you'd ever seen. My dad even answered the door. He was like, my dad always says, "Is Lewis around? Is Lewis around?" And my dad's like, "I don't know. I'll go get him." And they gave him like hundreds of dollars worth of just like meat, like sausages and just like veal and all this packaged meat.
Mhm.
And was apparently very good tasting, a very popular cook. Smorgasbord of meat was had. Yeah, so
Yeah, so I mean,
it was a very real culture for
yeah, the
sure.
culture is fascinating. Honestly,
It
it
is.
is because I think the fact is that it's so different from a normal way of life to, and it's almost larger than life. That there's this
Yeah.
figure that is like has so much power, the Godfather role, and it's like, and the whole logo of the Godfather with like the pulling the
Oh, that.
strings.
Yeah. The
Yeah,
marionette strings. Yeah.
this idea is like this can't be real. Like this stuff didn't happen. Like organized crime just seems like how could this have been a thing? And then you look into it and there's so much.
Yeah.
It is
I,
cool.
another thing that I found really interesting about this is that they didn't really show any like deals or whatever. There was no like drug deal. There was no like people doing drugs, or there's no like you didn't see any of the gambling or the prostitutes, which are all all the things that they were sort of talked about and dealt with in the film. And it was all focused on essentially the politics of it, um, which is
Yeah,
wildly you when you say that it sounds like, oh, that doesn't sound very exciting, but it's the most exciting. It's like the most interesting thing. It's so interesting how good the film is at making you invested in sort of the inner dealings and goings on. It doesn't have to show you any of it, really. I mean, it shows you some of the killings and stuff, but it doesn't have to show you any of the other like nefarious things that they're getting into.
we mostly see the politically motivated killings,
Yeah,
like all
yeah,
these people who are vying for power, they're just
mm,
getting killed violently, and it's like
mm,
it's so cool because like just when you think someone has some semblance of power, they're getting murdered. Next thing you know,
yeah,
Sonny getting shot, gunned down like that.
yeah. That was like even if he had like two other cars with him, he wouldn't have stood a chance. There was like
Yeah,
15 people with Tommy guns. Just yeah, it was insane. It was a good scene,
and then
but
ultimately
very like, oh
Carlo.
geez.
It's Carlo, right? Not Carlos. Who's
Carlo,
the
yeah.
he gets killed at the end. He's like the last main one.
That was
What is it?
Abe Vigoda, I think, played him, if memory serves.
Hmm.
I think that was Abe Vigoda.
But he used the. They did this a couple times in the movie where they're like they use the same line from before, where he's like, Michael's like, "What am I gonna make an orphan of my sister?"
Yeah. Oh, I was thinking, no, Abe Vigoda was the guy who or the guy who was the betrayer.
Oh, that guy. Yeah.
Yeah, but then also Carlo was also in on the whole
Carlo is the abusive guy who
the
abused
abusive
his
guy. Yeah,
sister.
yeah,
Um, and so they used that line again.
yeah,
What do you? Am I gonna make an orphan of my sister? And then he
yeah,
does, but
yeah.
just a little.
It just straight up does. Yeah.
and and there was
That
also the other line that he recycled from Vito, where he's like, "I'm gonna make him an offer he can't
I can't
refuse."
refuse. Yeah, that's used several times. Yeah, in the
So
film. Yeah, I mean,
it's cool.
I didn't feel bad about Carlo. He was like
No.
when like that was like the one thing when that scene where Sonny just beats the crap out of him in the street. I was like,
Yeah, I like
yeah,
that.
that was pretty justified. He might have gone a little overboard, but because he flies off the handle. That's his thing. He's the hothead
Yeah.
son. So,
Which I've noticed, like, I still haven't finished it, but there are a lot of, like, similarities that were clearly inspired by this in Peaky Blinders,
mm,
which is a really cool show, but I'm
mhm.
not completely up to date, but there are definitely characters that resemble. There's, like, the hothead and
That's
similar
an
things.
that's sort of the Irish side of things,
Yeah,
rather than Italian.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
cool. But, yeah, the whole scene where he was, the sister was throwing things and breaking all of the
Oh
stuff, and
yeah,
I was just like,
yeah,
Jesus, this is
yeah. It was like that was quite the scene.
getting out of
Yeah, that was
hand.
like, ooh,
And then she had
yeah,
a knife, and I was like, okay,
yeah,
where are we going with this?
yeah. Oh yeah, and that was the cinematography of that scene was great too because like when she goes and hides in the bathroom, and then he follows her in there with the belt,
Yeah,
and then you see the mirror, so you see him approaching, but then the door shuts. I was just like, oh, that's so like horrifying.
yeah,
It's really makes you just like I'm sort of smiling because it's good filmmaking. It's excellent filmmaking. Horrifying to watch. It was like, oh, it just.
Yeah.
But
So there definitely is that balance of definitely some misogyny there, but also like we don't so you're not supposed to like this
you're not supposed to
guy
like him at all. Yeah, no. But I
that's
mean, like
beating her.
Sonny's cheating on his wife, and she seems not really okay with it, but she just sort of lets it happen. So
What you gonna
yeah,
do, right?
I guess. Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess when you're that's the
It's
thing.
rough.
It's like It's almost like they've
They are like
almost
second class, yeah.
sold your rights away, almost basically. Yeah, by marrying in.
Yeah, which is like that's why I know this is not going to be a great relationship for them.
Yeah,
No, it's like
yeah.
she could have had a nice life without him. It would have been great. But Apollonia had to go and get blown up, so he was
I
like,
know.
"All right,
I
I'll just
liked
go
her.
back to her. I'll just
I
go back
liked her.
to
That was such a. That was she was funny. I liked her. She
yeah."
was kind of a ray of sunshine, and
She
then
was just waiting. She wanted to drive him.
extinguished.
Just Jesus, that took me by surprise.
Yeah, I was like, I didn't see, honestly did not see that coming.
Yeah, so that's what I was like. I was impressed by a movie that is so widely like parodied and everything. There's still
Yeah.
some really big shocks for me, and still super effective stuff. And even the stuff that I did know about, like I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse. It's like, oh, that's still a cool line though.
Yeah,
It's still
for sure.
gonna make him an offer he can't
I
refuse.
can't refuse. Yeah. So one last thing before we wrap up. I mean, unless you had any other thoughts, but one thing I really found just absolutely fascinating was the fact that like Don Corleone, the Godfather, he's got this huge amount of power. He's a crime boss. But he has a moral compass. He's like, I don't want to have anything to do with drugs. Drugs is going to ruin all of us. Like, we got to draw the line somewhere, and that's the line he's drawing. I found, and it's like it takes a meeting with all the heads of families for him to be like, all right, I'll tolerate it. I'm not going to get involved in it, but it can happen.
But was that a moral thing, or was that just that the drug business is a really not
It's like
like a risky business to get into?
It's what's so fascinating about like the sort of the psychological aspect of this whole movie. It's like it's one and the same to him. Like that's kind of how it came across to me. It's like it does seem like it's a moral thing, but it's because it's dangerous. He doesn't want his family. He doesn't want. It's also personal because he's got all these political connections. There's so many layers. That's what I think. What made it so fascinating? It makes it so like we could talk about this movie for like 3 hours. We could talk for the whole length of the movie. Yeah, there's just it's very interesting.
Yeah, 'cause, like,
for sure.
he clearly values family above all else, and that's a big theme they push in this whole lifestyle in general. But what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, his very death, like he comes down to him dying playing in this garden with the kid.
Yeah.
And so it's like they do a good job of showing the little softer side of him, but
yeah, it's again, it's one of those sort of simple sort of scenes of family. It's like I could imagine my dad doing that with grandchildren. I don't think he would ever do anything quite like that, but like I've seen interactions between like grandparents and their grandchildren and stuff like that. Like it's a very sweet sort of thing, and it's interesting how simple it's just a heart attack. He's risked his life. He's almost gotten killed in this movie, and it's just a heart attack that gets him in the end. It's something that there's something like soft and poetic about, like just went out like that.
And then there's always an interesting storyline where they have the guy who's clearly done a lot of bad stuff, is involved in crime, but they make him likable by showing often how they're attached to the family and everything. They've done in a lot of things. Like even Breaking Bad has a character like that too. It's always interesting, but it's like at the end of the day, you can like the character, but he's still a bad guy, right? I mean,
yeah.
So you should come to that conclusion, even though mob culture is cool.
and fascinating. It is very fascinating for sure.
Yeah. So, and what score would you give it out of 10?
I was debating this back and forth. I was like, am I really gonna throw this out? I can't just keep throwing. I can't just throw that out like boom, boom, boom. Like I can't just throw. This movie's a 10, man.
10 out of 10.
This movie's a friggin' masterpiece.
Yeah.
I was like, I didn't want to necessarily throw it out there, but it's like I don't know if I can go lower. I don't know if I can. Maybe I could.
I think you're right. I was thinking 9.5 going into this.
Mm.
But I do think it's a notch above The Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
And I did give that a 9.5. And I mean, it's, yeah. If this can't get a 10 and there aren't like glaring flaws in it, then I don't know what can give it a 10. It's I would say 10 as well. All right.
I'm just scared. I don't want to come at it and be like, then with Godfather 2, if that comes and blows me away, I don't want to just go.
It can't be better.
I don't know if I can do
it.
It
Can't be better now.
How can it? Yeah.
No, we've already maxed out the score. Tarqaron score of 10.
Jeez, man.
So we might have to eke into the higher than 10 score for that. If that's the case. 12.
It's more than a masterpiece.
I mean, that's the thing, is if part 2 is as good as this, even that in itself is almost like, wow, that's a feat, because the first one,
it is, yeah.
In the nature of being a sequel, it's almost like it's gonna be not as good as the first one. So if it's up to par, it's like, wow,
yeah,
it's already more impressive.
Yeah,
but I don't know. We'll
I don't know. I know nothing about the sequel, so
yeah. So stay tuned. Next week we'll get into part 2, and then part 3.
I think it's even longer, by the way. I think
Really?
it's 200 minutes long. Yeah, I think it's 3.5 hours.
Okay, I'm down.
So yeah, well, it's 3 hours 20 minutes, I guess. But I'm down. I'm down for it. I like this. I'm game for for some more.
It's not an 11 movie series like Star Wars, but it'll be a nice trilogy, and I'm already glad to watch this one. So
yeah, it's a treat for sure.
All right, so that's it.
Zach, where should the fine watchers of this video, do they enjoy this? What else should they go check out by us?
Well, let's see. We mentioned The Silence of the Lambs. Could do that, or I'm just thinking the highest scored thing. The other 10 out of 10 we have is Hamilton.
It's true, yeah.
Which is so different. Go watch the Empire Strikes Back review.
Sure.
Go watch that. I gave that actually a 9.5. I forgot. I thought I might have given it a 10 too, but you gave it a 10.
I gave it a 10, yeah. It's one of my favorites. Still one of my favorite movies ever made.
But I think The Godfather is above it for me, honestly. Godfather, it's like Godfather is one of those classics where you look at it as subjectively a good movie.
Yeah.
And usually those tend to be like ones that aren't on the top of my favorites list. It's just like I know that's subjectively a great movie, but it might not be one I'd rewatch or something like that. But I think this is at the top, up towards the top of my favorites now too. So I think it's great. So go watch the Empire Strikes Back review. All right, and then subscribe to the channel, subscribe to our podcast feed, like the video, leave a comment, hit the notification bell, and follow us on Twitter at Tarqaron TWO. All right.